Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? The dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. Hey, where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you stop talking, dear? I'm trying to watch the game. If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. I planned a hunting trip next week on your birthday. I didn't ask you cause I knew it'd be okay. You'll make some dinner while I watch this fishing show. I taped it over our old wedding video. If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. Your cooking's good, dear, but it's not like mommy makes. The diamond in the ring I gave you is a fake. Your eyes look puffy, dear, are you feeling ill? Happy anniversary, I bought you a treadmill. If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. You're a man who doesn't want to get stabbed with a knife. These are the things you don't say to your wife. Yeah, that'll get you in trouble. That's a lyric that, man, it hits you right here, doesn't it? Second one, trying to get there. Well, I want to share with you a little bit of comedy, if I can. These are all jokes about my wife, or about me and my wife, I should say. The name of this concert is From No to I Do, and it's all about our dating. Several years ago, I got asked to share at a Valentine's banquet, and so I put this together, and this is the second time I've shared it. So you guys get the privilege afterwards of letting me know whether I should just continue singing or include this in what I do. Because Pastor Lynn, you're the first one to invite me to come share a comedy concert. So let me begin. It's got several segments. The first one is called, I just titled The Arrival. This is how I went off to college. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. The oldest brother, my oldest brother, he's 10 years older than me, when he went off to college, he told our mother, Mom, when I get to college, I'm going to line up all the girls and pick the one I want. And it kind of became an inside joke to our family. Actually, we all thought he was joking, but the more I got to know my older brother, I don't think he thought he was joking. But anyway, each one of us boys, as we grew up, each successive one, when they went off to college, either they or Mom said the joke. So now I'm the youngest. It was my turn 10 years later to head off to college. And I said, Mom, when I get to college, I'm going to line up all the girls. And she said, yeah, and pick the one you want. And I said, nope. First, I'm going to ask if any will have me. And hopefully, if there's a choice, I'll pick. Did you imagine that story with your kids someday? Well, kids, your mom and I's story was not like a love at first sight kind of scenario. It was more a lack of options. Right? Now, I was joking, but my goodness, trying to date in college proved that I might have been true. All my buddies, I was in a quartet. All of them were finding girlfriends right away. We were traveling around to churches and to youth camps in the summer, and every one of them was getting compared to either somebody from New Kids on the Block or 90210 or all of these heartthrob celebrities. And finally, towards the end of that first summer, somebody finally came up to me and said, "You know who you look like?" And here I am waiting for which heartthrob, which celebrity, and he said, "Boom Boom Mancini." You know who Boom Boom Mancini is? He was a boxer, is my understanding. So the other guys looked like teen heartthrobs, and I looked like a guy who got pounded in the face. One of my buddy's girlfriends pulled me aside one day and he said, "Mark, all the girls were talking in the dorm last night, and your name came up." I said, "Really? What happened?" She said, "Well, they were talking about, girls get together, they start talking about which guy they thought was best looking, and they named different guys. Which guy that they thought would be the best kisser." Ooh, they named some guys. And finally somebody said, "Which guy on campus would you feel the safest with to walk home, to not try anything?" And somebody said, "Mark Umfleet." And they all agreed. So once again, all these other guys were admirable, and I was the one they thought of like a brother. Well, anyway, it's my second year now, sophomore. And it's coming up time for the Valentine's banquet. They had renamed the Valentine banquet that year to the Friendship banquet because they knew pressure was on everybody to get a date. So they tried to rename it, but we all still knew you had to have a date. And we were about 2 weeks out. And again, all my buddies had their dates, and I had no one. And so my buddy and I were driving across campus. This was on a Tuesday. And we're driving along, and he pointed to this gal that I'm going to refer to as the hot girl. Okay? He pointed to this gal, and he said, "What about her?" I said, "No way. For one, she's out of my league. For two, she hangs out with the baseball team." Now, on our campus, the baseball team had a reputation. And girls that hung out with the baseball team had a reputation. A reputation that a young ministerial student should not be associated with. Okay? So that was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the girls' dorm was having an open house. And so this is when guys were allowed to walk the hallways and enter the rooms as long as the door stayed open. So I'm walking with my buddy. His girlfriend is up on the third floor, and I guess I'm going fishing. I'm hoping I can just catch one for the banquet, right? And so we're walking down the basement or the first floor hallway, and I turn at a door that's open, and I see hot girl sitting there reading her Bible. And being the ministerial-minded person that I was, and seeing the need for some guidance, I turned to my buddy, "See ya." And I walked in, found out she was hanging out with the baseball team because she knew their reputation. And she saw them as her mission field. And she was studying her Bible in order to find answers to their questions. Oh my goodness. Not only hot, but holy. So Thursday, I'm in the library, and it was about lunchtime, and I'm talking with a gal. Her name was Angel, and we were on opposite sides of the library cubicle. You know what I mean? The desk with the walls around it, to where you can just lean at the top. And the more we talked, the more we leaned into each other, Angel and I, because I had found out she didn't have a date for the Valentine's banquet. I didn't have a date for the Valentine's banquet. Now, I got to tell you, at this moment in my young adult maleness, I was not too quick on the uptake at catching the subtle clues of the woman. Okay? But I could see it in Angel's eyes that afternoon, or that noonish, right before lunch, that it was in her eyes as if she was saying to me, "Just say the words." And so I leaned in and said, "I'm getting hungry. I'm going to lunch." I did. And as I walked out, get this, as I walked out, I said to myself, "She's plan B." Now put this into perspective. This is the guy that for a year and a half could not buy a date. The guy that looked like Boom Boom Mancini. The guy that every girl thought of as a brother. And for the first time, a girl is showing interest. And I said, she's plan B. I walked out of the library, started walking over to the food service, the dining hall, and I saw Melinda, is her name, another gal that I was interested in. She knew I was interested in her, and I had heard through a mutual friend that she simply thought I was too short. Okay? I'm 5'6", she was about 5'9", you know. I thought she was worth the climb. But apparently I wasn't worth the stoop. Right? So I walked on past, thought I can't ask her. Saw another gal named Heather. She had never looked my way, not even once. And I walked into the north door of Baldwin, got my food, and as I sat down, I looked over and at the south door of the dining commons, taking meal tickets, was Hot Girl. And without hesitation, I said, there's the girl I'm going to ask. And I walked over and I got about 10 steps away from her. She heard me coming and she looked up and she said, no. And I said, no, you don't know what I'm going to ask. You're going to ask me to the Valentine banquet. All right, you do know what I'm going to ask. So I went back and ate my food. I found out that I was like the 5th, 6th, 7th guy that had asked her, and she said no to all of them. Okay? That was Thursday. On Friday at lunchtime, I'm walking out of the dining commons, and I'm walking past, and we're walking out the north door, me and my buddy, and on this day, Hot Girl was at the north door taking meal tickets. And as I walked past her, I saw her, and I wasn't going to make much eye contact with her. She had already rejected me. And so as I'm walking by, I look at her, and all she did was went like this. I said, 6? What is that? In my mind, I probably calculated like I was the 6th guy that she had rejected, and she's rubbing it in. And I said, 6, what's that about? And she looks over her shoulder at a poster that was on the wall for a comedy duo that was on campus that night, the Phillips Brothers. Tickets were $3. $3. I was quick. 6, that's the cost of 2 tickets to the Phillips Brothers tonight. She nodded her head, yes, and I went, are you asking me on a date? And she went, if I was asking, she said, if I was asking, I'd have to pay for it. So I asked, and I walked out of there. We made plans for that night. I walked out of there as happy as I could be, until I made it about 50 feet, just out of her sight. Walking with my buddy, and suddenly, absolute joy turned to total agony and horror when I suddenly realized something. I ain't got $6. I skipped every class I had that afternoon, begged, borrowed, and finally got the money. And we went to the Phillips Brothers. The next week, we went to the Valentine's banquet together. Officially became a couple that night, Valentine's Day, 1992. And the next week, she was, again, taking meal tickets. And a fellow walked up to her. Fellow she didn't recognize. She'd never met him before. He wasn't one of the original 5 or 6 that had asked her before I had. He walked up to her, and he said, I represent a bunch of guys over at the boys' dorm, and we want to know, what does Mark got that we ain't got? Dory, my lovely wife back there in the back, she laughed in his face, right, and turned away from him. She came and told me, and so I told her, I said, next time he asks, here's what you tell him. When he says, what does Mark got that we ain't got, you tell him, I got the hot girl. Yeah. So, I don't know about you guys and your dating, but the first kiss is always awkward, isn't it? Might have been a little bit more so for Dory and I. You see, when Dory was really young, before she was even a teenager. She had made the commitment that she would not kiss a fellow until she was confident that he might be the guy that she was going to marry. No pressure, right? So she came into our relationship having never kissed a fellow. I, on the other hand, had experience. Not kissing a guy. Kissing a girl. I knew somebody was going to think it. So it was going to be up to me to lead the experience. So it was 2.5 months into our relationship. Now some of you fast kissers are thinking, 2.5 months? How did you make it? It was tough. If nothing else proved my commitment to her, I think 2.5 months spoke volumes. And for all of you slow movers who say, man, 2.5 months is a little bit too quick for young college kids to be thinking about marriage, you got to understand something. My parents got engaged on their second date. They would have got engaged on the first date, but my dad didn't ask because he didn't have the ring. My mom would have said yes, but he didn't ask. And my grandparents, my mom's folks, my grandfather didn't even know how old my grandmother was until they showed up to get the marriage license. And she showed up with her mother because she was too young to sign for the document. She turned 16 before they got married, but yeah. So actually 2.5 months is pretty slow for my clan. But that's where we were at. And I remember the night we were walking back to her dorm. It was dark. This was in the spring. It was almost curfew. And we stopped just shy of the lights at the front door, in the shadows on the sidewalk. And we stood there holding hands a little bit and sensing the moment was right. I leaned in for that first kiss. And she turned away and giggled. And ran inside. I walked slowly back just in time for curfew to my dorm, and my roommates were there, the two buddies that I traveled in the quartet with, and the ones that had girlfriends, and they knew what was going on. And they got to the point that every night they would ask me, so did it happen? Did you kiss her? And every night I had the same answer, no. And the more they asked, the more I got frustrated, and finally I said, just shut up. If anything changes, I'll let you know, right? So it happened night after night from that moment on. I'd walk her back, we'd stop just shy of the light, still in the shadow a little bit, we'd talk for a little second, and then I'd lean in for that first kiss. And every time she would turn away and giggle and run inside. And every time I'd go back to my room, knowing my roommates were going to ask their stupid question. Then one night, same thing. It seemed like the moment was right, and I leaned in for that first kiss, and she turned away and giggled. But she didn't run inside. And I thought to myself, I might get a second chance. So after a little bit more talk, I leaned in for that first kiss. Again, she turned away and giggled. But she didn't run inside. And I thought, this might happen. And I don't know how long that rodeo went on, but I had gotten to pacing. I'd go and I'd lean in for a kiss, she'd turn away and giggle, and I'd take a couple steps away to strategize, to rethink, what do I have to say? And then I'd come back with a new plan, say a couple things, maybe well, my I love yous were sincere, so I don't know that I could have made my I love yous more sincere, but some sweet nothing, lean in, she'd turn away and giggle, and I'd step away. So one of these times I leaned in, she had turned away and giggled, and I started to pace away, and what I didn't know was that she followed me. She was setting up the ambush, okay? So I stepped and I thought of what I could do, and as I turned around, not knowing she was right there, I turned around and whack, she giggled and ran inside. And I stood there for a minute, and I walked back to my dorm, knowing what my roommates were going to ask. And they asked it, I walked in, and they said, did it happen? Did you kiss her? I said, I don't know. It happened so fast, I didn't get a chance to pucker. Does that even count? But the next night I was ready. Truth be told, it was a week before I got to participate. Now think about that. Dory's first experience with our first kiss and my experience with our first kiss, a week apart. That's why if anybody gets to bragging, I tell them, our first kiss lasted 7 days. So after 9.5 months of dating, or 9 months of dating, we were getting ready for our 9-month anniversary. I put it in my head that I was going to ask her to marry me. But beforehand, her folks lived in Delphi, Indiana, which was about 2 hours away from Marion. And I was old-fashioned. I wanted to go and ask her parents. And so we went over there. I got to tell you, Dory's folks, her dad was a preacher. My dad was a Wesleyan preacher. Her dad was a Church of God preacher. A Church of God Cleveland preacher. If you don't know what that is, let me just express that well, there is no prejudice in my family. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. My first brother married a Caucasian gal. My second brother married a Native American. My third brother, he's been married several times. 2 of them have been Oriental, and he lives in Taiwan right now looking for wife number 4. My next brother, just older than me, married a Latino, and I married a Pentecostal. Okay? Yeah. So, we go over it, and I don't know that her father really liked me that much, but the night that I asked for her hand in marriage, their permission, I'll never forget both their answers to me. I mean, it still warms my heart to this day. Dory had gone away to go take a shower and go to bed, and so it was just me and Chet and Karen in the living room together, and Chet was actually asleep in his recliner. And so I first asked Karen, and I said, hey, we're getting ready for our 9-month anniversary, and I want to ask Dory to marry me, and so I'm asking for your permission. And her words were the best. I mean, super sincere. If I had any question about how they felt about me, she answered it when she said, Chet, you better wake up for this. And what? So I repeated to him, and I love your daughter. I'm going to ask her to marry me. I'd like to, and I'm just seeking your permission. And him, right in tune with Karen, said, well, it's her life. And he went back to sleep. I took that as a yes, and next week I asked her to marry me. So for our 9th anniversary, I got my roommates all to leave our apartment, and it was ours. I took her out to eat. We went to a movie, and we came back, and I gave her cheesecake, which is her favorite dessert. She hates it right now. She's on a special diet with no dairy, and so she can't have cheesecake. But once Melissa says you can, I'll buy you a big cheesecake. And so I bought her cheesecake, and I bought her 21 baby pink roses. Let me explain the significance of that. When I went into the florist, baby roses was all they had. Pink was the only color. And 21 was every one of them they had in the bucket. So I bought them, and I gave her a card. Everybody tries to be real special and unique in the way they propose, and so I gave her a card that simply said, congratulations on your engagement. And while she opened the card, I untaped the ring that was on my side of the table, and I walked over and I knelt down beside her as she stared at the card. Like her parents, she made me ask twice. Her father only had one requirement, was that we wait until after she graduated. He didn't want me marrying her to prevent her from finishing her education. And so we did. 7 hours. We graduated at noon. We got married at 7. And if you asked either one of us, we would not do it again. We'd get married again. But we were so excited about the wedding, we don't remember the graduation. And we were so tired from the graduation, we don't remember the wedding. About 2 months before the wedding, though, Dory came up to me. Guys, you may love this. Girls, you're going to say, wow, that was brave. Dory came up to me. We were in the ministerial building, in the lobby, and she came up to me. She had her hands behind her back. And she said, in 2 months, or whatever time period it was, we'll just go 2 months. In 2 months, we're going to say our vows to each other. And part of those vows is that we are going to forsake all others. And I just want you to know, I love you so much that I know you're going to make that ultimate commitment to me. But between now and then, you have my permission, she said, to go and sow your wild oats. Yeah. What? And then she handed me this package she had behind her back. It was a bag of wild oats. Good for sowing, it said. I immediately ran into the ministerial office to tell all my professors, "You won't believe what Dory just said to me." I didn't know yet. I kept those wild oats for the longest time, and then I think a mouse got them. But that's it good. It's not good for a preacher to have wild oats to sow. The day of our wedding, this is my favorite joke. This is, personally, I think, my best joke. The day we got married, the building that we got married in was, it was a commercial property that had gone out of business. And the Marian Church of God had purchased it in order, because they had outgrown their traditional church and they needed a new facility and they wanted something less threatening than a church. And it was the perfect location. It was right next to a Bob Evans restaurant, shared parking lot. It was right across the street from, I think, Lowe's or Home Depot, right down the street a block away from Walmart. I mean, right on the bypass, the main drive. So it was the perfect place. But the thing is that the commercial property that they had purchased, they were only halfway done in converting it to a church. The commercial property they had purchased was a muffler shop that had gone out of business. And at the time of our ceremony, it was still half muffler shop and half church. But what I mean by that is they hurried up and finished the platform for our ceremony. They were already having service. Ours was the first ceremony. They finished the platform, so it looked nice, but in the back it still had bare stud showing. Through the door off the side of the platform, opened up into one of the old service bays. It still had the big garage door, it still had the pit and the lift and all of that. Out front, at the front door, they had a little plaque that said the name of the church. But out at the entrance to the parking lot, up on the pole, was still this 15-foot larger-than-life muffler that said the Muffler Warehouse. So when I say we literally got married in a building that was half church, half muffler shop, I am literally using literally. That's not the joke. We discovered there was a problem in getting married in a building like that. After it was over, we were exhausted. That's good, isn't it? True story. Yeah. So I was born in Aberdeen. Don't remember it, but raised my whole life in Montana. Dory was raised in Indiana. We met up there, obviously. And after we got married and had graduated, we stayed out there for about another 4 years, and then moved back to Montana. And I can tell you, and my apologies to those who are from Indiana on this, I can tell you there are only 4 good things that came out of Indiana. My wife, 2 kids, and a U-Haul. That's not fair, is it? There are other good things that came out of Indiana. I-70, I-80, I-90, just to name a few. No, that's me. There's still good things that come out of Indiana every day. In fact, United Flight 27 is leaving in an hour. No, I did not like Indiana. Can you tell? And how many were there yesterday? Enough of you weren't, so I can tell this other joke. It was a good joke yesterday, wasn't it? When we moved to Montana, Dory's parents moved to Florida. And for a while, her father harassed me because I had received a call to go to possibility, had been offered a church in Florida. And he harassed me that I had disobeyed God in taking his daughter to Montana when they moved to Florida. And so after a while, I finally won the argument by saying, well, our move to Montana was more biblical than your move to Florida. How do you figure? He said. And I said, well, Jesus himself said, the foolish man built his house upon the sand. And the wise man built his house in the Rockies. Yeah. Well, I probably should stop telling jokes about my wife. You know, my wife and I do not have the perfect marriage. And being totally transparent and honest with you, that is because my wife is not perfect. But I'm a forgiving man, so it works. I'm in trouble. Hey, don't worry about me. The hotel room that they put us up at over at Boomer's is the only room they had left had 3 twin beds. So I mean, we're embracing this grandparent thing, like literally. Turn the light off. How you doing over there, honey? Yeah. She tried falling in bed with me, and I fell out the other side. Several years ago, when I was writing songs, I'd written I don't know how many songs, and it was coming up to Valentine's Day, and I thought, you know what? I have not written a song about my wife. And Valentine's Day that year was going to be on Sunday, and I thought I should write and surprise her with a special song. And so I was on my way to the shower that morning. Here's just a little tidbit of information. Almost every song I've ever written, I have written in the shower. There is a problem with that. Paper gets wet. But I was on my way to the shower, and I even said a prayer, Lord, give me a song to write my wife. A song that would change the world, I said. And sure enough, I got in the shower, and immediately a phrase came to mind. Just one line, and I wrote the rest of the song later. But I want to sing for you the song I wrote to honor my wife that is titled, She's Gone for Good, Now I'm a Better Man. I'm serious. Listen close. There were times in her teenage years when the boys they asked of her the cherished gift of innocence that she refused to give. She chose to keep her purity for the one God had for her, and for his love she waited, and in his love she lived. She could have given it away, but she chose a road less traveled, and she walked the narrow way and followed God's own plan. And every time she has been given the choice of right and wrong, I'm glad to say she's gone for good, and now I'm a better man. Did you catch it? Took my mom 3 times. There were times in our marriage when I I was in the wrong. I've given her every reason to simply turn and walk away. But she vowed her love would always be for better or for worse. I'm glad she chose to love. I'm glad she chose to stay. She could have given it away, but she chose a road less traveled, and she walked the narrow way and followed God's own plan. And every time she has been given the choice of right and wrong, I'm glad to say she's gone for good. I want to be the better man, the man that she deserves. So my heart I give it all to her without reserve. She could have given it away, but she chose a road less traveled, and she walked the narrow way and followed God's own plan. And every time she has been given the choice of right and wrong, I'm glad to say she's gone for good. And now I'm a better man. She's gone for good. Now I'm a better man. It's not a bad song, is it? I was at a church down in Florida, and I sang that song and shared the story, right? And then sang that song. And afterwards, this 90-year-old lady came up to me and she said, "Your spouse is gone for good?" And I thought she was playing with the words like I was. And I said, "Yeah, she is." Or yep, she has. And she said, "Mine too." And her granddaughter said, "Grandma, I'll explain it to her later." I want to step away from the jokes now and share with you the greatest lesson that Dory and I have learned in our marriage. If I was to ever write this story down, it would maybe be titled like this: the greatest things I've learned about my job and my life, I have learned from Job and his wife. You guys know the story of Job and his wife? You know the story of Job in Scripture? How God and the devil came before God, and God said, "Have you considered my servant Job?" And Job went under some great testing in order to see if he would deny God. And so Job is out one day, and a servant runs up and tells him that all of his livestock, some of his herds have been rustled, to use our Western terminology. They've been rustled. Some neighboring raiders came in and killed all the servants and took the livestock, except the one servant that came to tell him about it. While he was still talking, another servant ran up, and the rest of his herds that were off with another group of servants. Same thing. They all got rustled, and the servants killed, and only the one servant survived to come back and tell the tale. And before he is done, another servant runs up to say that all of his children had gathered at the oldest son's house for a celebration. And while they were celebrating, it says the wind struck the four corners. Maybe a tornado hit the house, leveled it, killed everyone inside except for the one servant that came to tell Job what had happened. In one instance, Job had lost everything that represented wealth in the ancient world: children, servants, and livestock. All of it lost in an instant. And then, let's say the next day, it's the next chapter. We don't know exactly what the time period was, because the devil went before the Lord again and skin for skin, let me touch him, because that was the first condition. He could do whatever he wanted to Job but not touch him. Well, now, the gloves are taken off. And so Job gets stricken with an infection of boils, so severe that apparently death was a possibility from it. And so he's sitting in a pile of ashes. That was their treatment back then. Sitting in ashes with a broken piece of pottery, scraping the boils open to get the infection out, and then rubbing the ashes so that the lye could get in there and try to kill the infection. That's the only thing they could do to treat it. I mean, you can imagine the misery and pain that Job is in. On top of losing everything else, here he is losing his health too. And then his wife steps into the picture. And isn't she a piece of work, right? She comes in and says those famous words, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" Right? You all know the story. And she's always represented as the most insincere and insensitive wife that ever could have lived, right? Haven't you heard it that way? Of all the things that Job had to lose, why couldn't he lose that wife too? Right? One day, I was being attacked as a pastor by people in the church. I was being attacked. It was crazy. The people were gathering to pray for my salvation. That was one of the things that came my way. And just accusations coming from the left and the right, and I was feeling miserable, and for whatever reason I chose to read Job. And I read about his confrontation with his wife. And suddenly it dawned on me. I ask you guys this question. When Job lost everything, well, let me just put it this way. When Job lost his children, what did his wife lose? The children. The Bible speaking that the two become one flesh, the husband and wife become one flesh. What do you think his wife was experiencing at the sight of Job sitting in a pile of ashes, scraping infection out of open wounds so severe that he could have died from it? Anyone here experience or know of somebody that their spouse went in the hospital because of COVID, and the one who was on the outside wasn't allowed to visit them because the protocols didn't allow it? Anybody go through that? Or know of anybody that did? Heartbreaking. We put my mom in the nursing home right as COVID started. And, a year into COVID. But the protocol was, the nursing home was in lockdown. And after a couple of weeks, my dad said, it's like a divorce. I can't see her. I can't even go visit. Nothing. 14 days of isolation in the hospital until she could move into the nursing home. And even when she was moved into the nursing home, my dad wasn't allowed to go see her for over a month. It was painful. I said there'd be no more jokes. I got to tell you this one. My dad was a pastor. My mom was my friends in high school called her the super Christian. She had never even said a swear word in her life. Never wore fingernail polish, never nothing. Right? She was very Miss Proper about everything. The first day I finally got to take my dad to go visit her, we could come in the entryway between the door to the outside and that little entryway and then the door to the inside. We could come in that little entry area. They had a chair there for us to sit in. And they would wheel my mom up on her wheelchair to the other side of the door. And then my dad could call on my phone and they would answer on the nurse's station phone and they would talk that way. Now my mom has dementia. That's why we had to put her in the nursing home. So she was not fully aware what was going on. So after a little while of looking at her, my dad says, "Boy, I'd sure like to open that door and give you a kiss." And my mom, Miss Proper, super Christian, said, "You want to go at it right here?" The nurse about fell out of her chair. Oh my goodness, my dad said, "What did she say?" I don't think she meant what she said, but... So back to the serious story. What do you imagine Job's wife was experiencing at the sight of her husband in pain? When I read that, what made me even think of it was it said, that after their confrontation, that in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. And I suddenly realized she had gone through everything that he had gone through, and for him to kick her while she was down with his rebuke, "You foolish woman," right? That's why he's quoted as talking to her. I thought, boy, that would have been the harshest thing he could have done. And I looked at it again, and I realized she wasn't saying insensitively, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" I think she was saying, "I can't take anymore. If this is your end, if this is what's going to happen, end it already. I can't take no more. I need this misery to stop." And if you look at it, you realize the two of them had not engaged with one another in any kind of conversation when the torment of Satan came upon them. And her words shows that on her own, she was losing the battle. So then I looked at what Job said. And he doesn't say, "You foolish woman." You look at it again when you get home. He says, "You speak like a foolish woman." Now, calling somebody stupid and saying they're talking stupid may be just semantics, right? But remember that the Bible says, the fool says in his heart, "There is no God." Foolish didn't mean stupid. Foolish meant unbelieving. So if I could paraphrase what he said to her, not "you sound like a foolish woman," what he was saying is, you sound like one of the pagan women in town. One of the women who doesn't know any better. You sound like somebody who doesn't believe in God. If I can paraphrase it even further, I think what he was saying was, "No. You don't sound like yourself." And what I imagine is that in some unwritten, tender moments, he restored her hope. I mean, he said, "Do we accept good from God and not evil?" Yes. But I imagine there was some conversation unwritten. And maybe he rose up out of the ashes and embraced her. Because what we do know is she left that conversation and we don't hear from her again until at the end of the story, when blessing is returned and she is an equal recipient. Equal in deserving the blessing of God. And so the lesson I learned is what happened was, again, I was being attacked as a pastor. And my wife was like the strong shoulder for me to cry on for several days. And when I finally said, "You know what, I just got to get over it. Just shake it off, let it bounce off my skin, pick up by my bootstraps, and get back to work and not worry about what idiot people think," right? And so I did. And then suddenly, she brought it up again. And I said, "Honey, I'm over it." And I started to walk out the door. And I realized she had been strong for me to cry. And now it was my turn to be strong for her to cry. Make sense? And it dawned on me this, that all of us face battles. And my battles, and men, your battles, are your wife's battles. And your wife's battles are your battles. And if you dare to isolate and face those battles alone, you run the risk of failure. But together, you can hold each other up strong in hope and in faith, so that our commitment to God never fails. I know this from experience. Before I became a pastor, I worked for two other pastors. Well, before I became a senior pastor, a lead pastor, I worked for two other pastors out in Indiana at two different churches. And then we moved out to Montana, and all of a sudden Facebook came available. And you could look up people that you once knew. And so we looked up the old pastors that we had worked under. And both of them were divorced. Their wives had left them in an instant. Both men were ministers. And both pastors' wives walked out the door. And we kind of, not knowing the specifics, but having spent time with the families, couldn't help but think, somewhere along the line, he isolated himself from her. And trying to face the battles alone, she lost. And she had enough. I don't want to put every fault on her, because I imagine his fault was there too, for both of them. But we've witnessed it. So my encouragement to you guys is remember, don't isolate yourself. Sustain each other in hope when the other doesn't have one, whichever side of the relationship it is. And so what we've discovered is that as we both grow closer to Christ, we grow closer to one another. And we don't leave the other one isolated in any way we can. Another great example of this is, anybody ever seen the movie A River Runs Through It? The story of the McLeans in Montana back at the turn of the 20th century. He was a Presbyterian pastor. They were fly fishermen. And at the end of the movie, Paulie is killed. And Norman has to tell his parents that their son Paul has been beaten to death over a gambling debt. The mom leaves the room, and you hear her slowly walking up the stairs in her grief. And a little bit later, you hear the bedroom door shut as she disappears to cry. The father has one final question to ask: which hand was crushed? Because he wanted more details. And then the father gets up to go grieve. And he walks into the entryway of the house. And for a moment, he stops and looks at the open door of his study, his private sanctuary, that little room that he would disappear to when he needed to talk with God. And he looked at it for a moment, and then he turned and walked up to be with his wife. Because neither one of them should have to face a battle alone. So that's the greatest lesson we've learned in our marriage, and I hope it's an encouragement to you that don't face any of your battles alone. Face them together. Do not isolate one another. Because again, when you isolate, you run the risk of failure. I mentioned my folks a little bit earlier. I have one more song. This is the first song I ever wrote in the shower. And it's a song to honor my parents. When my parents moved to Helena, they were Helena, Montana. They went there to start a church, and the house that they bought was on the corner of Hope Road and Applegate. And my mom had always wished that she could somehow petition the county to change Applegate, its name, to Faith, so that she could advertise that we were the church at the corner of Hope and Faith. I mean, it's just kind of cute. And so this song is based on that memory of living in my parents' home at the corner of Hope and Faith. The second verse is not entirely about my wife and I, but it uses us. It talks in the first person about the new generations of us, our typical approach, the most common approach to difficulties in a marriage. And then the break, or the bridge, gives the simple solution. I would say it oversimplifies it, but actually, usually the simplest answer is the best answer. So listen close. This is called At the Corner of Hope and Faith. In this house where I was raised, Mom and Dad would always say that I love you for all time. I will be yours. Will you be mine? Their faith was strong, their love was stronger, and there was hope in each other. Love endured. They always knew they would make it. Love endured. With two hearts that beat as one, he could see in her eyes the love that he realized. Love endured at the corner of hope and faith. It's the same old house, inside's a different game. Me and my wife, we never say that I love you. Oh, we're wasting our time. Why do we live the same old lie? How can it last much longer without a faith in each other? Can love return? I don't think we can make it. Love return. And we stand the test of time. I never see in her eyes the love that I realize. Can love return to the corner of hope and faith? Oh Lord Jesus, come and make our love brand new. Return to this house the words I love you. Help me, Jesus, start with this heart of mine. Love remains. Now I know we can make it. Love remains. With two hearts that beat with one, I can see in her eyes the love that I realize. Love remains at the corner of hope and faith. Love remains at the corner of hope and faith. Probably recognize the Bible verse that that whole thing is based upon. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. Commit your marriage to Christ at all times. Stand in the gap for one another when you need to. And you can endure anything this world tries to throw at you. Let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this wonderful opportunity that I've had these last 2 days to share with these fine people. And I just pray for all of us and for our marriages that you will be always the third partner, the one who holds us together, that inspires and guides and keeps us filled with faith and hope and love. In Jesus' name, amen.